It's time now for the Nuff Said with Bob Koshinski podcast, brought to you by Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, home to spaghetti parm, and Rich Entertainment. They bring friends and family together through unforgettable experiences. And the Big Weck Radio, home to the oldies. Bob's guest on this episode of Nuff Said is NFL insider Vic Carucci.
Hey, it's your old buddy Bob Koshinski. We're not at Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant today. On this episode, we are down in the Bob K Man Cave because Vic Carucci will be coming to us via Zoom. He's out on assignment. We'll be talking about all the changes at the Buffalo Bills in just a minute. Of course, I want to thank Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant. They're our standby go-to sponsor. The Big Weck. You can't go far without listening to radio the way radio was meant to be, the Big Weck. And today we've got a brand new sponsor, and that is the Rich Entertainment Group.
At Rich Entertainment Group, their mission is simple: bringing friends and families together through unforgettable experiences. From live sports and theater productions to luxury travel and hospitality, they're creating moments that people truly remember. With 19 businesses and growing, Rich Entertainment Group isn't just a group of companies. It's a community built around connection, joy, and shared experiences. It's all about bringing people together, and honestly, that's something we can all use a little more of.
And with that, we're going to now go via Zoom to talk to my good buddy and the NFL insider, Vic Carucci. Vic, it's great to be with you. Even you're on remote assignment and you're always very busy. And, this is Super Bowl week, Vic, and we go back a long way. But we'll reminisce about the Super Bowl a little later because there's been such big Buffalo Bills news over the past 10, 13, 21 days. I mean, going all the way back to when they surprisingly fired Coach Sean McDermott. Now, I guess I'll start there because you follow this team very closely. Was that a surprise to you?
Not really, Bob. I felt it was in the wind that if they fell short of the Super Bowl, all bets were off as far as Sean McDermott's job security. And I don't mean it as a recent thought. It dated back to me to before the season. I just was hearing and hearing rumblings, feeling sort of a sense that things were uneasy there relative to Sean McDermott and relative specifically to his relationship with Brandon Beane, the general manager. This is not a new thing in sports, and really I don't see even a need to sort of cast a villain here, because some people have wanted to do that with Brandon Beane, especially because Sean gets fired, he gets a promotion, right, to president of football operations. And I don't see it as, okay, that makes put the black hat on him. Maybe it's just because I've been around this long enough and been jaded by it. I worked for a team. I spent many years working in the internal media for the Cleveland Browns. I saw these internal struggles. They happen, sometimes only at the executive level, sometimes at the executive and coach level. And the other thing is Sean McDermott, 9 years as a head coach, no Super Bowl appearance to show for it. So I think that naturally could have the clock ticking or had it ticking maybe a little at a more accelerated pace in this 2025 season, because you're paid to do one thing, get the team to the Super Bowl and win it.
Do you think he was surprised?
Not really. I don't get the sense that he was shocked by the outcome of, the aftermath of the loss. And frankly, almost everything about his post-game reaction, the extreme response he had to the ruling of the catch-turn interception by Brandon Cooks, where, this was Sean, member of the competition committee, calling out not just the officials at the game, but the entire league, the process, everything. He just went on such a rant that was the brightest neon light for me that something was amiss in the immediate aftermath of the game. And that's when I was, I was talking to my wife and I said, I just feel something is not right here. And then he follows it up with the really unprecedented. He's on the team plane before it leaves Denver, and he's calling Jay Skursky of the News, and just doubling down on those feelings of obviously of anger, frustration. Saying he was, and then saying in his press conference, standing up for Buffalo. It just felt so intense. And then, of course, add to that the not just the emotional, but flat out bawling by Josh Allen and then Deion Dawkins after the game, because I think they knew, they sensed or felt, and they're a lot closer to it than I am. And if I'm feeling it from whatever distance I have from the team, those who are part of it could certainly sense that this wasn't just a loss for all of them, that this was a loss that could very well have led to what it did, the dismissal of the head coach.
And I don't want to go back and rehash this because we've got a lot of new topics to talk about. But the day of the game, I thought the call on the field was correct. I guess I could have gone either way with that catch interception. The more I've seen the NFL films slow-mo, I could see it being a catch. But anyway, if and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Okay, Joe Brady. Again, as time goes on, I was initially surprised that because Brady was part of the regime. He was part for the last 2 years of the inability to get over the hump. And you brought up Jay Skursky, and Jay and I talked about this last week, 2 weeks ago. The Bills offense had the ball. In the last 3 playoff losses, the Bills offense had the ball last, except for the kneel down after they failed to come down and score a touchdown. So everybody has always said, oh, if we only had the ball last, because it goes back to the 13-second game.
Right.
And Josh Allen, the offense, has had the ball last, and they've been unable to close it out. They just haven't been able to close it out. So Joe Brady has been a part of that. But now I see the sense of renewed excitement with a new group of coaches, with these players who I think this erases, when you go back into camp yet again after yet another playoff loss, how do you reinvent yourself? Well, now they can, because they have a new coaching staff and a guy who's very easily excited, who can transcend, that sense of, oh, we lost again. Now it's it's a new morning, right? It's a new dawn.
It is. But, first of all, I understood where you and others were coming from with the idea that, how could Joe Brady be a candidate? And I know you and I had some back and forth with text,
right,
because seeing the names that you were kind of putting out there, and how I know you have good sources and you talk with people, but I never believed that they were going to go in any other direction except Joe Brady as head coach, based on what I had heard almost immediately after Sean was fired, that this was kind of the way it was going to trend, unless he did something. I didn't report that part. I just said it wouldn't surprise me. And what I did put out on X wouldn't surprise me if they went with the duo of Joe Brady as head coach, and then Brian Daboll as offensive coordinator. And, there was a lot of pushback on that. You mean the other way around? Or how could Joe Brady even be in this conversation? Yeah, I expected all that. But it always felt to me like that's where it was going to be, that organizationally, if you're doing things right as an organization, and this means that if my understanding and belief that Sean was, on pretty thin ice, so to speak, if they didn't get to where they needed and wanted to go, that you have a plan in place. You don't go into this with an open slate, get rid of Sean, and let's just throw this thing open. I never believed that was going to be the case. Now, yes, they interviewed or had 9 candidates. I'm not sure if they interviewed all of them. There was a report that Mike McDaniel didn't show up for his interview, whatever, the former Dolphin coach, but whatever, 9 people, and obviously, a wide net to say the least, in that sense. But the first interview was Joe Brady. The first thought to me was sticking to and having some continuity, some safety in this move. It's a big move to move away from the second winningest coach in Bills history, the guy who got you to the playoffs 8 of 9 seasons, the guy who won 5 division titles, the guy who got to 2 AFC championship games. You better have something at least that feels solid to you. And why I would think Joe Brady always felt solid, especially to Brandon Beane. Now, again, Terry Pagula, the guy who fires and hires ultimately, but he's got to lean on somebody. And I know there were those who wanted the clean sweep, felt that what should be Sean and Beane, and because they came in together, let them go out together. They were tied contractually, at least previously, to 2027. But you're Terry Pagula. You don't have, presumably, certainly the way you did going into the hiring of Sean McDermott, Kim Pagula, to do that with you, at least in her current physical capacity. My understanding clearly was that she was the biggest champion of Sean McDermott and the hiring and the negotiating of it all. I know that for a fact going in. It was more her than Terry. And this is, of course, before Brandon Beane showed up. So her not being in the picture in the way she was back in 2017, did that influence things now? Possibly. But it certainly set, moving on from Sean and creating that opening meant that Terry needed somebody to marshal, oversee, help, be a big voice in replacing him. That's where Brandon Beane comes in a big way. And then giving him that additional responsibility of president of football operations, overseeing coaching. That's a shift, a big one. And it tells me and told me this is going to be his show, even though, there would be a new name as head coach, Joe Brady. And then the other part of it is his relationship with Brady, Brady's acceptance of what this is now, that you answer to Brandon Beane, and that all the hiring of staff and all the assembly of all things football that go even beyond the coaches, or I should say coaching, but the way you operate everything from an operational football standpoint is going to flow through Brandon Beane even more than it did when he was GM. And as GM, a lot operationally flows there too. So this is why it was making more sense to me, rather than and finding someone from the outside who would accept those terms. And again, you mentioned some Clint Kubiak's name, who right now looks like he's going to be the next head coach of the Raiders after the Super Bowl. That was a prominent name, might have been the most prominent of guys not named John Harbaugh available, or Sean McDermott available. But I think at the end of it all, Bob, it worked out kind of the way it was projected to, with things going the way they did, the Bills not getting to the Super Bowl.
Well, now that everything is transpired, some of it makes more sense. And I don't know what your take on this is, but oftentimes when teams interview an individual for head coach, the interview takes all day. They do lunch, they do dinner, they spend a lot of time together. They really want to find out more about the person, not just the X's and O's. And these interviews, they did multiple interviews in one day. So that tells you that, maybe some of it was for show and some of it was part of the process. So Joe Brady brings in two very different coordinators. Carmichael has been in the league for a long time as the offensive coordinator. He's worked with Carmichael. Leonhard is relatively younger, certainly neither one has been a head coach, and Leonhard's never been a defensive coordinator in the NFL. So he's gone in two different directions, but one is what he knows, and one is kind of a rising star that there's been a lot of talk about. He's one of the next bright defensive minds in the league. So what's your take on his coordinators?
Well, let's start with Carmichael, a respected name for sure, part of the Sean Payton coaching tree, which has a big influence. Sean Payton, huge influence on Joe Brady, and I think that's a very good thing for the Bills to incorporate that knowledge, and has, I think, served Joe Brady well in the short time that he's risen to where he is now. And but I think in the structure where Joe Brady maintains the play calling, the design and vision of the offense, which makes perfect sense to me. That was the part that was working pretty well for this football team. It drove Joe Brady to the head coaching job in a big way. So why disrupt that? Sean Payton calls his own plays, right? As a head coach, others do too. Sean McVay. I mean, it's not a completely new thing in any way, but some coaches do it more than others, and certainly it's something that Joe Brady wants to accept. I think it's a massive challenge, though, to add that to the plate, this brand new plate that he is holding as a head coach, first time head coach, because he hasn't even begun to see the issues that will cross his desk as a head coach. That's not going to change, even with Brandon Beane's oversight and support, which I also think helps, by the way, the idea that Brady will, have that additional duty of play caller and coordinator to head coach, having Beane as the primary, head of football and coaching will help that. But Carmichael is a veteran voice, a veteran presence. Carmichael's ear is going to be a good thing for Joe Brady to talk, to have him listen to what he has to say. His eyes, extra set of eyes, maybe not necessarily a second guess, or it could be, but hey, you might want to consider this. You might want to look at that. Those are good, healthy, helpful voices. And my understanding, I don't know him well, but what I know of him, he is that kind of presence. So I like that. For Jim Leonhard, I think this, I know people were excited mostly because they saw other teams were inquiring about him. They liked the fact, of course, that he wore a Bills uniform. It's kind of a coming back home sense. He was respected as a player, a bright, instinctive guy, a guy who saw the game, and a lot of times, people on that back end of the defense, safety, they see the game in a way. Frankly, Sean McDermott's vision of how to build a defense started back to front as well. We know that, and generally that serves you well. Now, where I think it'll be interesting, number one, of course, he's never called defensive signals, never been the guy to call upon whatever the situation it requires per se as a coordinator. That's a big step. We saw it with Bobby Babich. It was a big step for Bobby, who had vast positional coaching experience, but when he got the main show, it was a new thing, and it had its ups and downs. I think there will be those for Leonhard. The other thing that I'm looking at is style, is philosophy, and he comes from a school where the base defense is a 3-4 look, primarily, different than what the Bills did previously, and aggressive attacking. So whether it's blitzes or pressure packages or simulated blitzes or whatever the kind of thing that brings it to the offense. And you heard Joe Brady make a big deal about us dictating the terms, right? The team is going to dictate the terms, and and I know people buy into that. People hear, oh, that sounds cool. It sounds like he really, be more aggressive than Sean was, because what did we know the Sean McDermott defense to be? A lot of bend but don't break, a lot of deep zone coverage, passive in many ways, too passive for a lot of people, giving up third down passes, then, tighten it up again on the back end or in the red zone. And people want the defense to force more of the action. I think it sounds great, but two things. When you bring pressure, it better work. It better force a mistake or something, if not an interception, at least an incompletion. Two, the people who you're leaving on an island better be equipped physically and mentally and every other way to do that. Do they have those guys? I think we'll see.
Well, You're right in the sense that you talk, you talk strong. You talk. Teams should worry about us. We don't want, we don't want to be worrying about the other guy. And they've been on the precipice of being a great team. They really have. They've had moments where they've definitely looked like the best team in the NFL from week to week. And I mean, and if you go back and look at last summer, Vic, my God, they were already coronated as the Super Bowl champ. I mean, they made it to HBO's, Hard Knocks. And I want to bring up something real quick on that. So, because you obviously have insight. I've watched Hard Knocks in the past, and I've talked about this on the podcast. Most years, there's a lot of internal conversations between the GM and the coach on that show. This past summer, there was almost none between Bean and McDermott. So now I'm guessing that wasn't a coincidence. They probably said, we prefer not to have that recorded. Just, what do you think?
Well, it was notable. No, I saw and witnessed the same thing. I'm gonna throw this in there to make people feel real good. And how many Hard Knocks teams get to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl?
Right.
It's usually a death sentence for that.
Right.
And that was brought up, I know, quite a bit. Look, but no, it's worth noting that you didn't see the level of interaction there. I also, I mean, this isn't supposition. I know people who were involved in that whole production. I used to work with them when I worked with NFL.com for many years, and I did a lot of work with NFL Films that they, the Bills, and it sounded like it was mostly Sean, but put tight limits on access and what they wanted, and they go into every every situation like that knowing there's going to be pushback. So there was, and they had to. So then they adjust accordingly and tell stories, whatever. But look, yeah, I think people do like the tough talk, if you will, the enthusiasm. Joe Brady, it's easy to kind of light just his body language, his voice, his inflection. Now, I heard a lot of people online where they didn't love the whole, many drops of F-bombs and whatever. And there's a balance there. For some, it's exactly what the head coach should sound like. He personify. Do you
on the Hard Knocks show?
On the Hard Knocks show, and in general in the press conference. I mean, he was afterward. He was pretty. He's Joe, and it's like, and
yeah, he's very emotional.
And if you remember, and I know you do, people didn't love the Marv Levy persona of this Harvard-educated English history guy who was erudite and not profane. He was profound in what he said. Sean McDermott, not a big dropper of swear words. Again, it's the embodiment of what a head coach does. That make a head coach better? Because I always remember that, and you do too, right? How many people said, well, we don't have a guy that looks and sounds like a head coach. And then I want to say Greg Williams shows up with a lot of that. How did that work out? It's not.
Yeah, how do we make out?
So it's not I know you want the best of everything, and you want your head coach to feel like the cast character that you'd cast in a movie. It doesn't generally work that way.
Well, I always felt that Bill Polian more than made up for what Marv didn't say. Okay, so new team, new coaching staff. The draft. Now, I saw a quote from Carmichael, and you have to be careful anymore. You don't know what's right and what's wrong online and what's been made up. I saw a quote attributed to him that he said he had been jealous when he looked afar and saw Josh Allen for the Bills and what that meant, and how when he worked with Drew Brees, everything was to enhance Drew Brees and his ability to do what he does. And he said something to the effect, "I'm not going there to run an efficient offense." In other words, we're not going to dink and dunk, and we're going to go for the big plays, which everybody loves to hear. But that was one of the knocks I think this year on Brady, just that they kind of is Hank Stram said, they matriculated down the field. Little this, little that, a lot of wide receiver screens and that type of thing. So, Vic, I don't want to keep you too long. The Super Bowl, your pick for the big game Sunday.
Yeah, Bob, I've been going back and forth on this. I will say when the match was set, my knee jerk was Seattle. Just felt they were the better, team, and maybe they still are. But I don't see this as, and it's funny. I put my hand up like that, and all of a sudden my so you're going to see my hand. I'm waving. Yes, I should put up two. I don't know.
That's Zoom, yeah.
No, that was pretty cool. I didn't know it would do that. Lower. Oh, if I hit lower.
Well, you're Italian. You're Italian. It's going to happen.
There, I hit the lower hand button. How?
Okay.
Two old guys playing with technology here. So anyway, I thought it was a clear, and maybe it still is, but more I've thought about it, and the more I looked at what the Ram defense, I went back and looked at that game. Ram defense wasn't great by any means. I mean, yes, the Seahawks achieved a lot, and credit to their offense, credit to Sam Darnold and playing through that injury and their running game, Walker and all that. But I think they're going to see a better defensive team. I think they're going to see, even though I think the Rams are well coached, this is an exceptionally coached Patriot team. They've gotten there for multiple reasons. People will start with the easy schedule and other things, and maybe the way the matchups worked for them in the postseason, and still think that they dodged a big bullet if had the Bills gotten there and gone
Right.
to throw. And I feel strongly we'd be talking about a Bills Super Bowl. But that said, I'm going to lean in the Patriots' direction because I think their defense can do more to disrupt Darnold, can force the mistakes that Darnold, I think is more than capable of making. I love the story, the comeback story of him, and how he's bounced around from that Jet team and now all the way to this. It is amazing. The variable to me, of course, is Drake May, in that youth and lack of pocket awareness that I've seen that continues to plague him. So can Mike McDonald, who's also a heck of a coach, do something about that? But Mike Vrabel, to me, has been such an amazing gift for this Patriot team. And I call it a gift because there's no reason he shouldn't have been still coaching in Tennessee. Like how they
Right.
screwed that up is remarkable.
Vic, thanks so much for taking time out to talk with us. And hopefully the next time it'll be at Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant. And hopefully we'll get some Utica greens on the menu for you because I know you love the Utica greens.
Please work on that for me. Yes.
At Rich Entertainment Group, their mission is simple, bringing friends and families together through unforgettable experiences. From live sports and theater productions to luxury travel and hospitality, they're creating moments that people truly remember. With 19 businesses and growing, Rich Entertainment Group isn't just a group of companies. It's a community built around connection, joy, and shared experiences. It's all about bringing people together, and honestly, that's something we can all use a little more of.
So that's going to take care of this week's episode of Nuff Said with yours truly. Next week, we're going to be talking Sabres with Mike Harrington. Until then, this is Bob Koshinski saying have yourselves a great night and a much better tomorrow.